Hey everybody, this is Ceramic. Today I am starting a new video series called Exploring Reason. And what that is we are going to check out every single synthesizer that has been and is inside of Reason. And we're starting at the very beginning with the first synthesizer ever brought into Reason. That is the Subtractor Polyphonic synthesizer. Back when Reason was a very small and compact program, you had the Subtractor and the NN19 and then the NNXT, and that was about it. So this being the only synthesizer, it has some very unique functions, but it's also a very digital sounding synthesizer. And I believe that to be a good thing because we have other virtual analog synthesizers inside of Reason, Thor being a notable option. Even the new Europa is able to create some very convincing analog tones. So let's go ahead and explore the architecture, the functionality, and some of the sounds inside Subtractor. So this is a 2-oscillator synth with a noise source that runs into 2 filters that are linkable. One is a state variable filter, the other is a fixed low pass filter. Both of those flow into an amplifier. The amplifier is controlled by an ADSR envelope. The filter itself is controlled or controllable by a filter envelope, ADSR, with variable amount and is also invertible. There's a third envelope that has the ability to be assigned to 6 separate destinations, and that is the mod envelope. It has a variable amount and is also invertible. Other modifiers include 2 Lfos. Lfo One can be synced to your project tempo, a variable amount, and has 6 waveforms and 6 sources. Lfo Two is a little more limited, but it has some neat tricks up its sleeve. It goes to 4 separate destinations, rate, and a variable amount, but it can also track the keyboard. So as you play lower, it is a little slower. As you play higher up the keyboard, it actually increases in speed, and you can delay it. So you can have a delayed tremolo or a delayed vibrato, for example. Velocity is assignable to 9 separate destinations, all simultaneously. And then the mod wheel has 5, and aftertouch, expression, or breath control have 4 separate destinations. Multiple triggering modes, legato, so when you overlap notes, you will not re-trigger the filter and amplitude envelopes, and re-trigger, in which case every key you press will trigger those envelopes. A variable portamento time, and then a low bandwidth option that I personally find very interesting, and I'm going to show you in this video. So let's go ahead and get started. You can see I have the excellent Smart Electronics Smexoscope up here as an oscilloscope, and then I have a spectrum EQ up here so we can see the spectrum of the waveform as we work. Okay, so this is our basic saw wave. As you can see, it's pretty much a perfect saw wave. And the interesting thing about the Subtractor is that it's a phase manipulation synthesizer. So at this O, this 0, phase does nothing. But if we take it into multiply mode, you'll see that phase changes the waveform pretty drastically. And we can vary this and that allows you to get some interesting waveforms out of it. In subtract mode, something surprising happens. We end up with a pulse wave. All the way to the right, you have a perfect square wave, and then all the way to the left, you have nothing, 0 DC. So you can use this for pulse width modulation from 50% duty cycle down to 0. You also have other options for that. When we go to the square wave, you'll see that multiply gives us both directions, so from 0 to 50 and from 50 to 100. When we subtract them, we get an interesting waveform. And if you look at the spectrum, you'll notice that it becomes a little bassier. And a little more hollow, which is pretty interesting. So moving on, going into our zero phase mode, we end up with two more waveforms, a triangle, which again is a perfect triangle, and a sine. Very simple, a pretty pure sine, one fundamental here. So now I'm going to show you the 5 through 32 waveforms, and these are all samples. I also believe the saw, square, triangle, and sine to be sampled as well, and I'm going to show you why I think that later. So here we go. Let's check out these waveforms. So there's your 32 waveforms, and you can hear some of them are either noisy or or have no fundamental. Others make for really great organ sounds. So now we're going to go ahead and bring our single saw wave through the filter to show you how it sounds. Here's our basic saw wave. I'll take the filter down, and I'm going to use the filter envelope because it can sweep more smoothly than I can by hand. It's the low pass 12. Here's the 24. Notch. And high pass 12. You'll notice that it doesn't have a very sharp skirt, so to speak, because it's a 12 dB filter. And our bandpass. Again, it has a kind of peculiar behavior. So let's bring in some resonance with the 12 decibel per octave filter. And to my ears, this sounds like a late 80s, early 2000s Roland digital filter. That's kind of how I hear it. So let's go ahead and take the resonance up to 3/4. And then all the way up. This filter will not self-oscillate in any mode. As Nick Batt likes to say, you've got your sing-song harmonics. We'll take it to the 24 decibel per octave mode. try it again. And you can have various filter responses by, for example, taking your high pass and enabling filter 2. You can have a real band pass here. Take my polyphony down. You can get a very thin sound out of it if you like, and you can link these filters so that they sweep together. Even though you won't see the controls move, they're actually sweeping together in a linked fashion. So we'll take it up to 12 again. And take my level down to normal. And we're back to our saw wave. So what we're going to do is turn on oscillator 2. You'll see that the phase is set between them. Without any detuning, they will always start at this phase. And if you detune one a little, you can fix that phase. However, if you keep them detuned, let's say by 6 cents each, you'll see that they're free running, that the tuning is always changing. So that's nice. The phase doesn't reset when you're using a detuned saw type patch. Now you can also get some interesting polysynth type of sounds that are pretty classic. For example, using our square wave and putting it to multiply. So we have pulse width modulation. Let's use Lfo One. Let's press it into service with our phase. There we go, and we turn oscillator 2 on, make sure its phase is 0. And you have a pretty classic polysynth sound there. And with no effects, of course, it's a little dry. Effects really do help out Subtractor a little bit. In any case, there are some additional features here in the oscillator section. If you turn oscillator 2 off and the mix all the way up, you get silence, which allows you to isolate the noise generator. So color all the way up gives us white noise. You can see the spectrum is completely equal all the way across. Now if we turn color down to say 64, you get what I believe to be pink noise. With a pretty even falling response. And interestingly, when we take the color all the way down, we get red or brown noise. Not sure. Correct me in the comments, please. Notice the bass response really changes, and you can use this to create wave or thunder type sounds. And I happen to like that sound a little bit more than the standard white noise. White noise can also be used with this decay function here to get hi-hats. So we'll turn the noise off, bring our mix back, and turn oscillator 2 back on. And we're still at our pulse width modulation plus saw wave patch. our filter envelope back down, our filter all the way up, and we're going to go ahead and show you the FM. And for this, I'm going to use 2 sine waves, just like the DX7 does. Put the tuning back to normal, and I'm going to use the mod envelope to sweep the FM amount so that you can see what happens in a smoother fashion than I can do by hand. Oop, I've got the phase. That's the issue. Lfo One is still working. And you can hear, in some ways it's almost similar to oscillator sync. In other ways you've got a filtering type sound, because of course these are 2 sines and you're adding harmonics. You can see in the spectrum how it brings them all the way up and then brings them back down. It's pretty interesting. And then the more complex the waveform, the more complex the result. And oscillator 1 is always the modulator, oscillator 2 is the carrier, so pardon me, I have that backwards. Oscillator 2 is the modulator and oscillator 1 is the carrier. So if we put the mix all the way over, we get nothing but the FM. There's also ring modulation. I'm going to turn off the mod envelope, and we can use this. We could sweep the pitch of oscillator 2, for example, and get a ring modulated sound. So let's hear that. Just with 2 sines. Let's try waveform 5. And you can hear the aliasing in there. And speaking of aliasing, I'd like to show you something I discovered a while back about Subtractor. Let's go to the triangle waveform. Turn off oscillator 2, and we have our standard triangle. Now let's turn on low bandwidth. You can hear a little bit of a difference without anything. If we take our polyphony down and portamento up and sweep it all the way up, listen to how it changes. And this is much more obvious on a saw wave, so let's try that. Oh, polyphony went up. See the holes in the frequency response here? So if I take portamento off and play up and down the keyboard, you'll see in the analyzer where the holes are in the spectrum, and you'll hear as the samples kind of reset. And so taking that to its extreme, Again, I'll go to a triangle wave and show you all the way up at the top here. You get a very stepped waveform. And you can use that. You can use that stepped waveform, sample it, and then bring it all the way back down to get a really gritty, almost sort of Nintendo type sound out of a triangle wave. This happens with the sine wave, the square, which hardly looks like a square anymore, as well as the saw. So this G here is where it resets, and the G sharp is the one with the huge hole in the spectrum. You can do that all the way down at the bottom as well. And they're a little more stepped. See right here. Kind of changes. All right. So that in itself is my my kind of demonstration of Subtractor. I haven't showed you much about the Lfos or what velocity or aftertouch can do. I'll go ahead and show you Lfo 2 right now before we cut out, because it's kind of interesting. So let's put it on oscillator 1 and 2. Really obvious, right? So let's make it keyboard trackable. It gets into FM territory all the way up here. And the delay, let's say we want a bit of portamento. Pardon me, not portamento, a bit of delay, vibrato on our sound. And of course, that's just an automated way to do something you can also do with the mod wheel. You can bring in Lfo One using your mod wheel. Helps if I turn the amount up and what it's doing. So there's some options for you to use. This was Subtractor Polyphonic Synthesizer, the very first synthesizer ever used, ever created for Reason, and some of the different things that you can do with it. It's a highly interesting synthesizer. Those different waveforms along with FM and ring mod, you can create some incredibly gnarly, gritty sounds out of it. Great aliasing tones. You can use those in your productions as special effects or as sounds in and of themselves. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please follow my YouTube channel. Go ahead and like the video. And you'll see links to my Instagram as well as links to my Facebook and my Patreon page. If this content is something that you really like, please consider supporting me in my Patreon page. I would really appreciate it. All right, Ceramic out.